And we're back. It is COMP397 and it's winter 2016, week 5, lesson 5, part 2 of our broadcast, and lots of people fell asleep on the last one. But please stay together for this one. Okay, so I'm not gonna, I can find fruits online, like, and different things, because remember, we wanna match up some of our code. So when I click my button, as an example, when my spin button or whatever, it's gonna generate some kind of code, right? Okay. What I want to do now in Fireworks, I've got my slot machine image, right? And I want to create custom buttons, and I need to position them, right? I don't want to, if I go in here to show you, here's the space that I have for my buttons, right? So this is where the space is going to be. So if you figure how big this space is, and if I want to measure it, again, I can do it a couple ways. I can just measure the size roughly. Right, and again, it looks like I got about 323 pixels, 320 pixels wide. That's 320 pixels wide with spaces and everything else. So the total number of columns I have, if I divide it, let's say by 5, right, 320 pixels will be 32, about 64 pixels around. That's a pretty good size, 64 pixels roughly, or 60 pixels per image. So let's make a button by hand, right, that I'm going to do over here, and that's why I preserve this image here as well. Right, because it's 586 by 170, but we just can get rid of it for now. I want to make a new one, a new button that's around 64 by 64, right? Let's just do that. So I'm going to make a new canvas that's 64 by 64 with nothing in it. Here's a button, and this is my idea for the button. That's how big the button will be. Now 64 by 64 is probably going to be big enough if you use it on a device that your fingertip will be able to press on it, right? Usually it's between 60 and 80 pixels for a fingertip, okay? So depending on what it's going to be, 64 pixels is probably going to be big enough. All right, so that's one, if I ever want to go that way. The second thing is I want to zoom in as much as I can. This is 64 pixels, but I'm making it massive, right? So that way I can go in there and draw the image that I want, which is going to be this color. Now, here's my color. I preserved the color that I used last time, and look, it's got the white border and everything, right? That's why I chose that. Okay, cool. Well, this is good, but unfortunately for me, it's not going to look very buttony because my color that I got here and the color that I got on the background is almost identical. Actually, it is identical, right? So how do I modify that? Well, I mean, again, I could choose a darker color. So right now we're at, you know, the color that we're at, C433-2C, right, kind of thing, right? And I could choose it so that it's darker, you know, a little bit darker than the rest, or even darker than that. Right, so more like a darker color. I want to do that for two reasons. One, if I make it darker, it's going to stand out in my image, right? I could make gradients and everything else so it looks like a button, but right now I'm going to make it a square. And inside here, I'm going to put in some text. I'm going to pre-do the text and the buttons. I don't want to use Create.js text to go in there afterwards. I want to use the buttons. Remember, everything you can do as much as you can do outside of the program, better than for you to do inside with programming. Programming takes cycles. Cycle slows down your program and makes it ugly, right? So the first thing I want to do is kind of decide on the number scheme that I'm going to use, right? So I'm going to kind of go in here and I'm going to start typing. And if it's, by the way, if it's wrong, right? Like I'm typing this way, you know, why is it like this, right? Because the last time I made stuff, I made it go up and down actually, right? I can make this wider, right? And even if I do, it doesn't matter because of the way that I've laid out my text. Here's my text value right here, df. And what I've done is I've spun it around, right? And I want to do it this way. So that's just my settings, if you saw that. But for me, your settings won't work like that because you didn't have that problem. So now I want to type in the value. So I want to type in, you know, bet, the word bet, right? And then something like, you know, bet 1, bet 10, bet 100. Let's do the bigger one first. Let's say the most I can bet is like 100. I don't know for now. So do bet 100, right? And I'm just using 64 by 64. My font size right now is about 22, right? And I want to center this inside my buttons. There it is, centered, bet 100. Now this will not look like this. And I got lots of space for bet and 100. So I can actually go a higher font size, right? So I want to go as big as I can because it's going to be too hard to see if I don't do that, right? So let's go 26, let's say. And if it's too wide, that's okay because I can just increase the size of my my thing so it fits. And when I'm trying to make this, this scale up a little bit so that it fits as much as possible with this thing. And the same thing goes up here with this, just kind of make it so it's smaller. And I want to kind of center this thing so that it looks nice. And if that's not centered enough, like for example, it's too much, notice that I also have centering controls with Fireworks. Now, right now, I'm going to center. I can also go to the left, right? So all the alignment is centered, right? But I have, because of my spacing, as an example, if I just double click in here, you'll see what I'm talking about. The line height is quite a bit of, there's quite a bit of line height for each of these things, right? So there's my line height. And I could kind of cut that down, because right now, see, my line height is about 120. So let's just highlight, kind of choose that particular thing and change my line height to about 100%. So there we go. Oops. There. That's pretty good. Bet 100. And look how proportional it is. It's very square. Let's see what it looks like. I'm just going to copy this for now the way it is, as is. And let's go back down here and see how big it is and see how it's going to look like. Bet 100, right? So that's really big. In fact, it's too big, right? 64 by 64 is a good finger, but it isn't going to be anything that's going to help me out if I only have 5 buttons. I could do it, right? I need this. I need bet 1, bet 10, bet 100. Let's say 3 buttons on the bottom. So 1, 2, and 3. And then I need a spin button, like here. Something like that, right? So those are the buttons I need, like 4 buttons that I'm going to put in. You can certainly make it many more buttons, right? Like I had done originally. I had like a bunch of buttons, bet 1, 2, 5, 10, 100, 200, 500, whatever you want, right? I'm only going to make it so it's 1, 10, or 5, or 100. Those are the 3 buttons that I'm going to use. It's pretty big. So this is the first button that's going to go here, right? And again, I'm going to try and do this as proportionally as possible. Okay. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm telling you right now, I'm not going to save it along with my background. I want the button image to be its own ping file, right? So that I can, when I put it onto the actual image, I can click onto it and I can make it look like a button. That's what I wanted to do, right? And I already have a button class that I'll be able to receive my image, whatever image I want. I've been using it already, right? So that's one thing I want to do. I want to do this button. That's pretty good. So, I mean, it's not perfect. Does it match up with the theme? Is it clashing? It's probably okay, but this is probably what it's going to look like. At 100%, it'll look like this, right? Bet 100, right? Okay. So that's okay, bet 100, 64 by 64, that's how big it is. Let's save this thing, so File, Save As, and I'll put it inside in the same place as my slot machine background, and I'll call this bet 100. Button, bet 100 button, right? And press Enter, save. Now let's change this thing so it says something else. Instead of bet 100 button, it's going to say, bet 1, right? Bet 1 button. File, save, save as. And again, all I'm doing is changing the name of the button, bet 1 button, and then I'll do bet 10. Oops. So same font, same style. And notice that the style of the font is Consolus, which is kind of like a console font or one of those type of things. It's a retro kind of font, bet 10. File, save as, bet 10. There we go, bet 10 button. Okay, so we got bet 1, bet 10, bet 100, and now I need the spin button, right? And I want to make my spin button green, something else, some other color. That's easy to do. So I'll just, first of all, I'll copy all this stuff and put spin. And I have to make this a little bit smaller because the spin button can't be so big. So 26 is too much. Maybe 24 would be better. There we go. That's cool. What I want to do is take this spin and kind of put it proportionally in the middle. So that's kind of right there. Spin. And the background, if I make this a dark green color, so I can just choose a different color. So go here and choose some kind of dark green color like this, right? So, maybe something else. No, I like the other one better. Okay, good. So this is my spin button. File, save as, right, as an example. And I make this spin button. So spin button, right? So I got my buttons. And now let's place them. But I need to remember where they are. And a good thing to do when we start placing these items is keep track of my X, my Y coordinate, and my size, right? And the best thing to do, the best tool for that for me is something like Excel, right? So let's pull up an Excel worksheet, right? Here's my Excel worksheet. By the way, I'll put this Excel worksheet up online for you too, right? Don't worry. So I pull up a new sheet, and I'll make this. Who does not know how to use Excel? If you don't know how to use Excel, you know, it's just a table, right? Hopefully you guys all know. If you don't know, that's bad, right? But it's okay. I mean, so I'm gonna make this like 20 pixels wide, and I'll make the whole body of the Excel document white, just to make sure that it's we hide some of these things and make it easier to see. And I'm gonna talk about the object, right, which is the game object. Let's say we'll say the game object. It goes here. The name of the game object goes here. I need to know my X and Y, my width and my height. So that might change. So width, height, right? And I need to know my X and my Y coordinates, right? So I need to know all those things, right? So that's what my table is going to look like, right? And I need to start typing stuff in, and then I'll put a table around it. So one of the things I need to know is my my bet1 button. Here's the stuff I have. Bet1 button. I know my width and my height is going to be 64 by 64 because that's already preset. So 64 by 64. I don't know my X and Y coordinates yet, right? But I will. And so let's copy that a couple times. So bet1. Again, this is the, you know, the math behind how I do things, right? And make sure that we have exactly where the button is going to be. What I'd like to do is be able to wrap these buttons in the exact same kind of location on the X coordinate. So the X coordinate is going to be the exact same. I don't know what that is yet. And the Y coordinate is going to change, whatever it's going to be. And these are the values that I'm going to put into my code, right? Okay, cool. So now my bet1, bet10, bet100. So there's no guesswork, is what I'm saying. I'm going to try and position it, and then I won't have any guesswork at all. All right. The next piece I need is my spin button. So spin button. Spin button is also going to be 64 by 64. You know, as an example, right there it is. And the spin button is going to also be, you know, X and Y coordinates. All right. So let's start typing this out. I'm just going to put in some borders here. You know, please don't be bored with my borders. So there we go. And we can make it nicer later. But I'm going to save this thing just because I always worry, right? Something's going to break. My computer's going to go down. Something's bad. I'm going to lose all my work. So I'm going to save this. I'm going to go to my desktop and COMP397, and I'm going to put this in assets actually, because this is kind of describing my assets. So slot machine demo, and I'm going to go to assets. Here it is, and inside my images folder, I'm going to put a little Excel file, which I'm going to call image map, right? And save. Okay, cool. Got my images, got my buttons, I got all this stuff, and I'm going to put them where I want to put them. Okay, cool. How do I do the next ones? How do I figure out what these values are? Well, I got it right here, right? I got my slot machine. Here it is. And I got bet100. Let's load up the other ones. File, open. And I'm going to load up the other pieces that I want, right? So this is the wrong one. Let's go back to assets and go back to COMP397 and go back up to this one here and go to slot machine demo, go back into images. And I want to load all those buttons up. Bet1. Bet10, and I also want to load up the slot machine, the spin button, and press open. So boom, 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 they all open up, right? And now what I can do is I can copy and paste them. But before I do so, let me get rid of this too, because the problem with this one is there's two images involved here, right? So let me go pull up the other one. I'll pull up the bet100 too. I forgot to do that. Search bet100. Bet10, bet1, I'll do it in order. So bet10, bet1, bet100, and spin button. Okay, the reason why I'm pulling them back up is because I want to make them groups. So I want to group this one together. That's the Control or Command G. And I'm grouping them so that way when I deal with them later on, then I can deal with them as one image as opposed to multiple things. It'll mess me up. Okay, cool. So now I want to grab my bet1 and put that in place. And then once I have my bet1 in place, right, I want to decide from there where the rest of them are going to be. And whether I don't want to do it by eye, I want to slightly calculate everything. So let's just move in closer and closer and closer until we get to where we want. All right, so what's the space that I have that's left over for me? And I'll do more of an exact call here. So again, I'll go to measure. So we'll start off like this, approximately from this to this. So my space on this side is pretty much, and again, this is reduced about 323, which is kind of an odd, 322 pixels. So 322 pixels, I have 4 buttons. How much space do I have per button? Calculator. 322 pixels divided by 4 columns is 80 pixels per column. Each of my images is 64 pixels, right? And I'm going to lose a little bit of pixels on the right and the left side because of my little border, right? As an example, which is around 4 pixels if I'm not wrong. So if I say 80 minus 64, I roughly have about 16, let's say 8 pixels for as 8 pixels for each side, right? That's what I got. Plus, let's say approximately on this side, I've got a loss of about 2 pixels, right, from this side and the other side. So 2 pixels, that's 10 pixels coming on from the left side. All right, so that means if I take this button, here's my button. Oops, here's my button. And I'm just going to lock the background for a second so we can do that. I'm going to take the background and the button, and I'm going to put it right to the left side. So here's my left side. So I'm going to move this to the right 8 pixels. So that means it's going to go from 160, which is where this thing starts, approximately, to 168. That's the first piece. And then, so 168 is the first number. But now down is what the other one is. And if I go to the top, right, as an example, it starts off approximately at, what it looks like anyway. Yeah, there it is. The top is probably around at 169. So 169, and the bottom, if I was going to measure from the bottom itself, is roughly 172. So if I was going to see the height of this thing, just by doing one of these again, oops, let's try this again. All I'm doing is measuring the height, right? So there we go. So it's about 178, or sorry, height is about 103. 103 again. You're looking at one button that's 64 pixels minus 103, let's say 102 to make it approximately right. So 102, minus 64, we're talking about 38 pixels divided by 2. So we're talking about approximately 19 pixels. So I got 8 from the left and 19 from the top that I'm going to move down. And that's my first one. I need to get my first one going, and the other ones can kind of balance from there. I had 13, right? What did I say? 102. 19? Thank you. 102, and then divided by, minus 64, sorry. And then divided by 2, right? Yeah, 19, 8 and 19. Thank you for paying attention. So 19, 19, and 8, right? So 8 from the left. So from 160 approximately, this is 160 plus 8, so 168. And then if I take this and move it up right from the top, approximately 19 from the top, so 364 and 19. 364 and 20 would be 384, so 383. 383, right? It's approximately right. Maybe a pixel higher. I'm probably thinking it's probably about 382. Okay, it's by eye. Sorry, when I looked at it again, So that's my first one. So my first one is 168 by 382, and that's what I'm going to put in here, right? So 168, and what did I say? 382. Are we okay? 382, right? And actually, it's the other way around. It's 382. Yeah, 382 and 168. So it's always going to be 382. So 382 is going to be the number. That's where I'm going to put all my buttons. So 382. So 382, 382, 382. Now I got to find the other formula for these ones. We said that the whole width is
168 plus 64.
So so you're thinking about another the 64 plus 8 each time 8, 8, 8, 8. Okay, we'll see how that works. So if that's true, then I can go, this one is this plus 64 plus 8, right, which means the next one would be at 240. if that's correct, if your calculations are correct. I want to see if you're right. I'm looking at your calculations, and if that's true, then I'm going to say, well, that's equal to this, right? Plus 64, right? Plus 8, if we have 8 between everything. And that means that it's equal to this, right? Plus 64 plus 8, which means we're at 384. I don't know. Let's see. That might be off. But we'll try them out. 168, 240, 312, and 384. Let's see if that's correct. So we'll go back. Let's go back to this and place the buttons. And this is part of our pain, right? Part of our pain is trying to calculate what they are before we put them on. When we're using a graphic program to do that, so this is, again, this is 382, right? That's where it's supposed to be. And it's supposed to be 382 by 240. So this, I'll change that number. So where x is 240, right? I'm just going with your numbers, okay? So we can adjust later, don't worry. And the next one is 100, right? Oops. And then go back in here and paste 382. And what's the number? 382 by 312. Right, I'm just using your calculations, right? So don't worry about that. 312. And the next one, they're all the same size, but these are actually pretty good, right? Did I mess it up? 383, 382. Yeah, it looks different. 382. 382. There we go. It looks pretty good. You know what? I'm even comfortable putting them together this close. But the last one, right? It's going to be off. But that's okay because you know what? Maybe we want to separate the spin button, right? Makes sense. So I'm okay with it. Again, this isn't a science. It doesn't have to be. It's just it's magic. So it's just a matter of getting everything correct. This is wrong, right? Because if I went to 384, it's going to be right next to it. I'm going to have a lot of space on the other side. But it doesn't mean I can't rejig it if I didn't want to. So go back to here and paste. And if I go to here, what I probably want is something like this. Right, let me see. There. That's probably right. Maybe that way. There we go. Nudging a little bit that way. That's probably around right for me. Right? So X is 404 for me. Now, if you don't like that, maybe one more in there. Fortunately, I get a bit of separation so you can see 1, 10, or 100, and then spin the button. And so this is how you're going to spin the button. All right, so 1, 10, 100. So this is 403. That's a weird number. 312, 240, 168. Let's make it 402. 402 by 382. 402. There we go. 402. There we go. That's the number. So that's that done. All right. I've got my buttons. I know where they're going to be positioned. That's my first set of buttons. I want to put them all on my scene right now. Right. So let's do that. Okay. So let's go back to the scene. I'm not modifying anything. I'm not saving anything. There's nothing to save. I've already made my buttons. I'm just going back there and putting them on my scene, right? And this is where I'm going to put them, right? Okay. So going back to my code, right? They're going to be put on in my scene, right? But I need to include all my buttons in my assets. So these assets, I got to include all these buttons now, right? And by whatever reason, they actually came in this time, right? So I'm going to go comma. Notice how the size of my asset, my manifest, is going to grow. Right, so 1, 2, 3, 4 more buttons. And the first button is going to be called bet1. So this is my first one, bet1 button. Okay. And this one, because I've named them the same, right, I just can copy and paste. I do that on purpose, by the way. Bet10 button. Right. So copy, paste, and bet100 button. I know I probably could have pasted it, but what the hell? You do it your way. Right there. And this is my spin button. I'm pretty good typing, so I'm okay. I could make mistakes. I made a mistake with the slot machine instead of machine, I said machine. Right, but that's okay. So I've got my buttons, and now I want to add them into so I've modified that one script. I want to go back into my objects, or my scenes, and go into my slot machine scene here, and now I'm going to start adding my button. And I want to track all of them. So all of them are going to be variables that I manipulate. Why? Because they're going to be passed into, these buttons are going to be passed into my my images. But they're going to be button types because I already have a button class. Notice that in my objects, I've already created a button class. Now, we have a problem with the button class. My button class, I have to modify. because my button class, what does it do? My button class, my reg X and reg Y is centered. That means it's not the top left corner. So when I give it the calculations that I'm going to give it, there's two possibilities. I have to give it an offset, which is why bother even having an X and Y coordinate, or I should be able to turn this off depending if I put true or false. Do I want this? Do I want my button that I want to put in? Well, this is going to affect, now that I've made my class, I'm going to go back and modify a couple files. Do I want my button to, I want to give the option of my button being centered or not, right? So I want to create a new Boolean variable in my button class called isCentered, right? And I'm going to call this Boolean variable, here it is, right? Notice that I didn't decide my button width, height, and centered, that's all public right now. And let's just fix that up, right? So public, and public is centered. And I want to basically ask for that. So I want to ask for my path string, my number, X and Y coordinates, right? And then I want to also know if it's centered or not, right? So is it centered? And I'm going to put that is in there. So I'm going to say is, it's going to be a number or a Boolean, so is centered. But hold on, didn't I just tell you that if I have a thing and I want to put it up here, I can do this? And I can, instead of doing this, I can put this, cut it, and put it in here, right? Because that's exactly what I'm going to do. And I can mix and match like that, right? So what this is doing, when I put the public in there, it's doing exactly this, and then this is equal to public. So I've done it. That's done. All right, so now that I know that it's centered or not, I can test for it. I can say if centered, if is centered, if this is true, then do this. Otherwise, don't put it in. Leave it as is. And it's the default for all bitmap images is top left corner. So that's all the only check I have to make. So going in here, and if, and then this dot is centered, or I can actually look for is centered because I'm going to, I can look at the local variable as well. If dot is centered is true, right? And I can pull this into that. So that means it's going to be a test now, right? I can test to see if it's centered, and if it is, right? If it's centered, then that's good. That means that I can use reg X and reg Y. But unfortunately for me, I've used my button class in different scenes. I have it in my game over scene, right? Because now it's saying that my config for my start button, well, I want to put my center as true. So this is true, it's centered for this button. I have one button here, and in my menu scene, I also have a button which is going to error out because I don't have a true false for that. So I'm going to say that's true as well. That's the only thing I have to make. That's what the two changes I have to make in my scene. Because those buttons were originally centered, and now I'm giving it an option. You can center it or not. But for my new buttons, none of them are going to be centered. They're going to be all top left corner, right? So that gives me the ability for me to do that in my class. I need to transpile to make this one work for sure. Okay, so let me go back to my slot machine. Now I have my button names, and they're going to be private. So private, and I'm going to name them the exact same way. You know, bet1 button, right? That's the first one, which is of type objects.button, right? And then private, you know, bet pen button. So I want to access these later on. Objects.button and private bet 100 button. Objects.button. And the last one is my spin button, which is objects.button. Okay, so I've got them named. And now what I want to do is I want to add them all in, right? So after my background image, because it's order of layers, right? My background image is first, and then on top of that, my buttons are going to be on top of that. And the order that I load up my buttons are the order that I'm going to see my images. Okay, so let's do this. So I'll do one. So add that one button to the scene. So a little bit of commenting here. And I'll say this, that underscore bet1 button, right? Right, is equal to a new objects.button. And the objects.button need a couple things. I need my path string, which is really easy, right? Bet1 button. I know that because that's the way I named them. I named them easy. And now my X and Y coordinates, which are here. X and Y coordinates are 382 by 168. 382 by 168. right? And is it centered or not? It is not centered, so it's false. That's the switch. I'm sending it to the button so that I can turn on registration marks, right, or not, right? Okay, I've got this. I can make them all, but I'd rather do them kind of all at once. I'm going to say this dot add child, right? This dot underscore bet1 button. Bet1 button. There we go. And that one's added onto the stage. So that's ready to go. And because this is a button, and if I wanted to do anything, I also have to make the event handler for the click event. Because my button, all it does now, it acts like a button, but my button class does not handle the click event because all the click events will be different, right? Let me show you what I'm talking about. So if I go to my objects, I've created a button class that has two things. I have an event that does a mouse over and a mouse out. So it kind of fades in and out of the mouse when I hover over my button, right? But it doesn't do the actual on click event. I got to make those now. So I might as well do it right away, right? So I'm going to go back to my scene class, my scene itself, and I'm going to make that event handler stuff happen right here. First, I've got to add the event handler. So I'm going to say this dot bet1 button, bet1 button, right? Dot on click, and I'm going to call it the bet1 button click. I could do it inline too, but I'm going to do it down there. So I'm going to call the this that I don't have yet bet1 button click event. That's what I'm going to call. I don't have that yet, but I'm going to create that here as a private event handler, right? Called bet1 button click, right? That is of type mouse event, right? So event, which is of create.js mouse event. So create.js mouse event. That's what it is, and it's going to return void, right? That's the event. I'm also going to pass in a reference to this, just in case I want to reference my pass other data into my button. Like for example, if I don't pass in the reference to this, it won't have access to any of this stuff. If I pass in a reference to this, I have access to all my member variables because of its being an event. Events block out. It has its own scope, right? So if I want to copy my scope or have access to my scope of my class, I need to pass in a reference to this. Okay, just letting you know. Okay, so cool. So now here I've written the event, and what do I want my button to do? So when I click on my button, for now I'm going to just do a console command because it doesn't mean anything right now, right? Eventually it's going to take away from my user money and update my scoreboard, right? That's what it's going to do. But for now, I'm just going to say console.log, right? And it's going to say bet1. Right, that's what it's going to say, bet1 coin or bet1 credit. Yeah, bet1 credit, there it is. And I know I'm going to need to do all this over and over again. So there's one button, right? And there's two buttons. This is where the meat and bones of this scene is going to be, right? There's three buttons, but I need to change all these things to different values. This will be bet10, and I'll copy it in a second, bet100, and I just want to copy this one over and over again. So be very careful when you do this so you don't mess things up. I won't do this one yet. Because otherwise you're going to have some problems. I don't have this one, this bet1 button click. So I don't have that, but I will. Okay, do the same thing. So bet100. You see where I'm going with this one, right guys? Bet100 click, which is just this. And now I've got to change what it says. So this is bet10, bet100, right? And let's make sure that this is all good. This is wrong. Bet100, otherwise we're going to get the wrong button. Okay, cool. So 1, 2, 3, and the places are wrong too. So I'm going to go back to my file to get the right position. So 240 and 312 is all I got to change. So 240 and 312. This is absolute positioning, right? What we're doing here. Absolute positioning. There isn't a layout or anything that we have in Create.js. We're actually pixel perfect. We're positioning in a pixel perfect way, right? Okay, cool. I need a couple of more event handlers, right? One for each of the buttons. So I'm going to add them in now. So they're the same kind of thing, right? So bet1, this is bet10, this is bet100. Okay, and there they all are. And this, I'll just change the values of the output. So we have some placeholders for when we do the actual bet. Here's a question. What if I wanted to pass in and use one event handler to handle them all. But depending on what I pass in, can I pass in a value or some kind of other thing in this case, right? And there's ways of doing that, by the way. For now, let's leave it as is. We'll go back to that and decide how to do this later on. Okay, so so bet 1, bet 10 with 103, 3 event handlers, 3 buttons, and we need one more for the spin button. And the spin button, my friends, is the main button of our entire code. This is where the entire piece of code is going to go in into my application, right? So we're going to call this add spin button. We probably need to update our comments as well. See how I'm commenting as I go, right? I recommend that because then you don't have to go back and add comments later, and it's a pain in the ass, right? And also in my comment, I can also just replace my spin button if I'm careful. Like spin button would be here, right? So the spin button. But this one's gonna have to be a little bit different. So this is gonna say spin underscore like this, right? So spin button. And down here, and here, and this is gonna be spin button click, which I don't have yet, so, but I will, which is gonna go down here. And we'll just say spin button click. But I'm following a pattern, as you can see, right? Now this is spin, spin those wheels. Or spin those reels. That's what I want to say, right? All right, so that's really it in a nutshell. I've got my buttons, I got my bet 1, bet 10, and so on. Let's test it out. Why am I testing it now? Why don't I just put all my stuff on my slot machine? How come? Yeah. Well, that's the problem, isn't it? Right, so that's good. So thank you. So go back to this, and it's 402. Right. So 402 is what this is going to go. Thank you for that. So partner programming, right? You're helping me program. I'm saving it. I want to transpile, and when I transpile, I want to check locally first before I didn't do that last time. Here I am local. No, that's remote. I don't want to do that. I want to pull up the other one. Is that one? Yeah, it's the one. I want to refresh. And if I go to start, I got my buttons and they're all the wrong places. Well, I just put them in the wrong places. That's all it is, right? But they're here, right? And look, they act like the way they're supposed to act, right? So if I hover over them, they do it. And if I click onto them, they're in the wrong places, but I'll fix that in a second. I just interpose the X and Y. That's all it is. So if I go back to console, right? If I click on bet 1, I get bet 1 credit. If I bet 10 credits, bet 100 credits, or spin those reels. So the buttons all work, right? That's what I want to get done. So I'm wiring up those buttons. I just got to interpose these values. So this one will be 168. Let's type in 168 like this. Let's kill this one. 168.32. And this one will be 382 and 240. Careful not to kill it, right? And this is 382 and 312. I can remember at least a couple numbers, even if I'm tired, right? And 382 and 402, right? And then that makes sense because the Y coordinate wouldn't change, the X coordinate would change. Let's go back to this. Did I make a mistake? 382, the X coordinate's going to be the same. And the Y coordinate would stay, no, the Y coordinate would stay the same. So let's just copy, cut, and paste. And then we'll just get rid of this. And we'll just relabel these. I'll be okay. All right. Now I will send this up to GitHub. But first I want to transpile again. All right, so transpile. There we are, transpile, and then I'll use my little tool here. I got 21 changes because I changed a bunch of little things. Add that in, and then I'll say added buttons to slot machine. There we go, add that in, okay, click, and push. Now you have all the buttons too. In a second, okay? We're getting there. We're sure getting there. And my goal is when I click that spin button today, I want to have a result, right? It won't be in the windows, right? But I want to have a result in the console. If I can get the spin button, give me a result in the console, I'm halfway there. Then all I do is now just replace the images that are inside those reels, and we're golden, right? Okay. So let's test it to see if it works on in my machine here. So this is on Azure. Refresh, and I should get my one day. There it is, start. Here's my buttons on Azure. So now I can hover over and it looks like a machine that has, you know, some kind of button effects, right? And it's up on Azure. I'm getting there, right? So if I look at my my inspector here, and if I go to my console, I can see that I did, when I clicked on these buttons, as an example, like my spin button, I'm getting that result. So the buttons are all wired up and ready to go. Now I just have to make them meaningful. Okay, cool. I need my reels, and I need to measure that really quickly. So going back to my image, what I normally would do is start measuring, and I want to measure a square, right? So I know I want to kind of measure from each one of these is exactly the same, right? So I'm going to kind of go in here as much as possible. And, you know, in order for me to do that, I'm going to even zoom in more, right? And because I need to be very exact here, else it's going to look messed up. So, oh, see, that's not right. There. From here till about here is where I want my image to be, which is about 53. It's about 53. It's not perfect. It should be, I'd like to always make it kind of even, but 53 is pretty cool because I have a middle, right? So 53 is what my size is going to be. And that means, my friends, that my image can be 53 by 53. Why is that? Because if I make it any bigger than that, so let me draw that image out, right? So I'm going to draw that box now, right? So let's draw it out, and let's change the border size. I'm going to change the border size to 1, right? There's my border size. And I want to make it dotted. So I'm going to kind of make it, so it's this kind of border like this. But instead of it being straight like this, bear with me while I do this, I can choose that the border type is a dotted or dashed border, right? So let's go into dashed, and we'll say a basic dash. Oops, dots, there we go. That's the dots. So that's what it's going to look like. That's where the image is going to flow, right here. And it's going to be right there. Right? See how I did that? So it's looking like it's the middle of the screen approximately, and it is, right? Right about there. Now notice that it's slightly off from where I want it to be, right? For this particular one, it should be here approximately. Now I can make it so that it's a little lower. So if I don't like that, I can make it so by eye, it's about this way. Now if I want to make it exact, I got to measure the distance. So from about right here, let's say, so I don't care about that little piece right there. Let's try it again. No. There. From about there till about here. I don't think I want to go lower than that. And that's about, height is about 65 pixels. 65 divided by 64, so it's 32 pixels on the top, and 64 and 32 pixels on the bottom. So 32 pixels from the top. So if I move this to the top, where I want it, which is right here, 32 pixels down from there, it's starting off at 294 pixels. I always go to my phone. Actually, it's better if I go to my phone. It's faster. So again, it's 294 pixels, and if I do my calculations, so 294 and then plus 32, it's 326 pixels is what this should be approximately. 326 on the Y. That's wrong, X. I meant 208, sorry. 208 plus 32, sorry, it's the wrong one. It's 240. So 240 is the Y. And where did that go wrong? Oh, divided by 2. So, sorry. So again, roughly 53. Right, because I have 53, not 63. What did I say that I had? Bear with me, guys and girls. Just want to make sure that they do the calculation again. Yeah, so about 68. So that's 32 total is half. And I divide that by 2, so 16. All right, let's do that again. Because I got to do equal numbers. So that's 16. So about 208 plus 16. So 208 plus 16 is approximately 221, which is where this first one is going to go, and then I can adjust it by eye. Well, yeah, that's a little bit too high. I think it's probably going to be around, to me, around there, it looks like. And it's going to be about there. That's where it's going to be. It's going to land, right? So it's right now, for my reel 2, I've got my position, right? And once I got my position for reel 2, I'm having for reel 1 and reel 3, no problem. So reel 2 is going to be approximately, and it says my height is 36, and I didn't want that. It should be square, right? So that's another problem. Let's make it 53. I don't know how that happened. I make something wrong. Yeah. That's what it's going to look like right now. I think it's a little big, right? If I was going to do it that way. It's a little big, which means I got to give a little bit of space on the left and the right with my, this is where the actual image is going to go. And inside the image, I'm going to have another image that floats inside of it, right? So I'm going to copy this image. You'll see what I'm talking about in a second. And paste. And then I'm going to take the second image and I'm going to kind of shrink it down a little bit, just a touch, right? And maybe even more. So what's that? What's that number? 52, 46. Make it an even number, 46. 46 by 46. So I'm going to put that, pull this one in the middle here. So this is the outer edge of the image, and this is the image itself. This is where it's going to float, right here. So I don't need this one. Okay. So that's where it's going to be. That's the actual image, the position of the image where it's going to go. And I know it sounds crazy what I'm doing, and you know, I'm pulling it up here, but the middle one is going to be at again approximately X298 and Y219 with a 46 by 46 width to give myself a little bit of padding on each side, right? That's why I'm doing, and a lot of padding up here. So if I want to take half an image, I can start it off right here, and you can see part of it, right? You might want to make this even smaller, and I made this image 46 by 46, but I can even make this smaller, let's say 44 by 44. And it seems pretty small to me, but you know, that's just because of the size of my slot machine, and you've got to adjust it for the size of your slot machine. I think that looks pretty good to me, right? Okay, maybe a little high. No, maybe that's, I don't know. Looks pretty good there, and maybe to the left a little bit. It's not even, but anyways, it doesn't matter. So 300 by 220 is what I'm going to take for reel 2. So reel 2, I'm going to go in here and just copy this a couple times. This we'll call reel 1. We don't have the number for that yet. Reel 1. This is reel 2, and this is reel 3. And this is the position of the images that are going to come down when it actually happens. So they're not going to be 64 by 64. They're going to be 44 by 44. Right? That's what the size is going to be. I know what they are. And the position for the first one is going to be 300 by 220. So this one here, 300 by 220. Okay, now I know that the 220 is going to stay the same, but the 300 is going to move over. So I'm going to take this image, I'm going to copy it, and paste it. This rectangle, we're going to call reel 1, like we did before. This one will be reel 2. We'll move reel 1 around. We'll take this reel 1 and move it over to here. We'll adjust it according to what we see. Make sure that it's the same as what we had before. So this is all going to be 220, right? This isn't going to change because that's going to be in the exact same position, right? So this has got to be 220, which it is. And that looks about right. That's about right. See? In terms of my my positioning, that's about right. So it looks like it's 216 for the first one. So 216 by 220. Well, if that's correct, and if from this one to this one is 216 minus 300, it's about 80 pixels. My estimation is that this should be about 380. I don't know, something like that. So 80 pixels, 220, maybe a little more. What is that? That's 84 pixels, so 384. Let's see if I'm right. So about 384. It's about, because they're all around proportional sizes, right? So 384. Let's try that out. Probably not going to be that, but let's see. So take this one, copy it, paste it. We're going to call this one reel 3, and we're going to pull this one across. It's pretty good. 384. All right, so 384 is where it's going to be. So it's not quite 384. You can see how it's a little off. Because that means these images, the reels are a little off, right? So that's why I have to adjust my layout, which means I'm going to put this to the left a little bit. And it's probably going to be here. Probably there. Just to be in line with what this looks like. Can you just check it out by eye? Yeah, it's around that for each one. So this one is, again, 383, which is the final number. 383. Off by 1. Okay, good. So those are my numbers, but I'm not going to put anything there. That's going to be my fruits, right? And in order for me to look at my code, I'm going to save this now, right? For each of the real or the images are going to go in here, right? If I look at my old code, because remember I'm basing my new code off of my old code, I have to be able to generate something, right? So remember that online, I have that old slot machine stuff, right? So if I go to GitHub, and if I look at slot machine, so if I go to Centennial, and if I want to search for slot machine, I have my old one, which is what I want you to base it on right here, right? So, by the way, I have the other example too. You can always look at that one, right? But from last semester. But here's the one that I want to look at. I'm going to look at my JS file, and under my main.js, which is where I have all my code, down into the depths of this thing, it's going to calculate. So when I spin my reels, which means when I click my button, my spin button, I'm going to do this function reels, this reels function right here. And the reels function, I can almost transplant. I can almost take it out, and I can shove it into my code as is, almost identically, because I'm going to take this number, and it's going to calculate stuff. And it's also going to tally how many blanks, how many grapes, how many bananas, all those things I'm going to have, right? So I'm going to grab this stuff, and I'm going to pull this in right here. It's going to calculate my bet line. So I'm going to take that, and I'm going to go back into my code, right? And inside my scene, for a second, here's my scene.ts, right? Oh, sorry, I meant to go into my slot machine. On the bottom somewhere, I'm going to have my private methods. These are other private methods that I'm going to have down here, but not event handlers. So I'm going to put them in here. So private methods, right? I'm going to copy and paste that one. So there's and I got some errors, right? And the reason why is because there is no check range function. Check range is a utility function that I put in. I also don't need the function keyword, right? So that's unnecessary. So let's get rid of the function keyword. And the other thing that I don't need, I need to kind of declare what kind of function this is. This is a private reels function. We can rename this thing later on, but for now we're going to call it reels, and it does return something, right? Because it returns my bet line, which is a string array, and that's what I want to return up here, string array. So string array. So that's what it returns. So I got that going pretty well. Let me just format my code so it doesn't drive people crazy. There we go. And this is just more of comments, right? When this function is called, it determines the bet line results. Okay, cool. So this is almost there, but I need my check range function. That's one thing I need to make this go. And let's transplant that one now. So I'm going to go back online, and I'm going to grab my check range function, which is right here. This is a utility function to check the range, right? So I'm going to copy this thing. And now, does it belong inside my scene? Maybe not, but it's okay. We can always move it outside into a config file or something like that later on. Right, so I'm going to save this. Just I'm going to kind of rejig this format here again. There we go. And I'm going to make this check range function private. So it's going to be underscore check range. Oh, there's an easier way to do that. Private. Leave it as check range, right? But this is going to be called this.underscore check range, right? So we're going to call this like this, check range, right? And all it's going to do is take the value and lower bounds and upper bounds, and it's going to return the value down here, right? I got to be careful here. So the opposite of the value. So one is the value, the other one is going to give me the return. So value really is a parameter, right? It returns the value, right? So I'm going to say this is a number, right? And my lower bounds is a number, and my check range, my upper bounds is also a number. And it gives me some errors. Why is it giving me errors? It says no best common type exists among return expressions. Because there is, see this thing here? It says there is no way of returning the number. And when I send in the number, when I go to outcome, the check range, what it's actually doing is sending in a number array, right? So the first one is not a number, but rather a number array. That's what I'm sending in. But the problem is if the value is this, it's going to be good. Otherwise, it's returning not the value, right? Not the value. So basically what it's saying is case is between this, then return the outcome of the spin, right? And what that's really doing is saying is, well, check to see if the number lies between 1 and 27. If it is, right, send in a reference to my number array, right? And my outcome is going to be, there's 3 numbers, 0, 0, 0, right? So check the range, send in my number array, and I'm going to send in my spin. How can that be, right? Because I only have, look, I'm only sending in one variable, right? Outcome spin, outcome spin, outcome spin, right? Which is in my for loop. I'm looking at my, which one am I looking at, ladies and gentlemen? Right? Outcome spin, right? That's how this worked before. So here's my math thing, and I'm saying take this right here, this value, put it into my outcome, right? Which is it's an array. And this is weird, eh? Look at this. So I'm not actually doing an array. I'm passing in the value of my array, which is a number, right? So it's actually not a number. It's a number value, not a number. I was right the first time, right? That's the first thing that's going to come in, a number. So a variable, a value that's a number. And also value might be a keyword. I got to be careful with that, right? So if my value is greater than or equal to lower bounds and value is less than or equal to upper bounds, then I can do this, right? That's the first thing that's got to happen. It's got to check. And if it's true, it's going to return something. It's going to check the range and return. Case, you know, this is true, right? That's what this is going to do. It's going to return a true or false. That's what it's returning at the end, yeah? So that's all it's looking for. So I don't have to return a number. I'm actually returning a thing there, right? So if I return a value, I'm returning, the case is 27, right? But I don't care about that. I don't want to return the value. I want to return it true or false. True. If I return true, then this case is true, and my bet line will be a blank, right? If it's returning false, then it's not going to be true, and it's going to move on to the next case. So that's all I need to do. So I need to say, well, instead of it returning my value, I'm going to check my value, and if this is true, return true. Otherwise, return false, right? That's what I really want to say, right, from this faulty code. And this line is really cool and all, but what's a better way to do this line? And then, you know, if I want to do it in one line, how do I do that in one line? Anyone remember how to do that? The ternary operator, right? How do I write the ternary operator in here? So I have a condition, right? And then I have a value, right? And that's my return. So my return would be the value, right? That's the thing. And I'm just going to say return the value if this. So I'm going to say, because this is the return that's going to be. So I'll put it down here for you. So return, if the value is this or this, right? Then return true, otherwise return false, right? That's like the one-liner, right? And that does exactly what this does. Make sense? So I kind of honed that up into one line. That's the ternary operator, right? So that's what this returns. This returns a true or false, which means this one returns Boolean. Now I've converted this thing from from JavaScript, the old ugly JavaScript way, to TypeScript. Okay, this is cool. So it says cannot find the name check range. Well, yeah, because this isn't called check range anymore. It's called this._check range because this is part of our internal function. So I'm going to go in there and fix that. And we're going to say this._check range. Now we have an issue, right? Because it says type Boolean is not assignable to type number, right? Because case number, right? That's what I wanted to return. So it's returning Boolean right now. We're going to get back to that in a second, right? But this is correct. So this is right. That's what I was returning. So I want to return a number or something else. So that's easy. It said -1. I can do that too. So return the value or return -1. And if it's -1, then I don't want to do anything. It doesn't make any sense, right? So I'm going to just go in here and rejig this thing in a second. There we go. Okay, cool. So that's all done. So I'm going to say if case you know, the number, whatever the number is, right, then the bet line is blank, right? So whatever this is, check the number, the outcome. So I'm kind of doing a couple things at once. If the number is between 1 and 27, that's what I'm doing. It's a complicated check, right, instead of a single number, right, then blank, right? And it's calculating what the number is going to be, right? So all I need to do is return a number, any number, and it'll work, right? If it's -1 though, right, if it's -1, the number is blank. And what I'm saying is, case outcome of the spin, my outcome of the spin. So I'm going to get a number here from the outcome of the spin, whatever I roll when I do this number. This is just going to provide me a number, right, from 1 to 65, right? If the number is -1, is it going to be right? No, it's going to be false. So this would be -1. That's what I'm returning. This, now I'm going back to doing a number. Let's see how I fix this. And this one will be the value. Now that fixes that problem. Because -1 would be a value that I can't get. It's not between 1 and 65. So that means none of it. It won't work, right? If it's true. And then that's one. And then the other one is, it's not between 1 and 65. So -1, right? If it is, then it'll work. It'll give me a blank. Now blanks, here's something that I did before. I calculated how many blanks, how many grapes, how many bananas, how many oranges, how many cherries, and all this stuff. Why did I do that? I did that in order for me to say, to do my next function, which is calculate, did I win or not? How much did I win? If I have this many cherries and this many bananas and this many, it's a very simple way of doing it. Is it the right way to do it? No, hell no, it's not the right way to do it. And we're going to fix that later on when we refine our code, right? But for now, we're going to take what we have, right? So we're going to go back up here and notice how I have this these values here for my grapes, my bananas, oranges, and cherries, and bars, and bells, and everything else. Let's grab all this. And we're not going to use the var keyword, and it's going to be part of our class too. So we're going to go back to our code. We're going to go up to here, and they're all going to be private variables, right? So we're going to do one of those down here, and we're going to also format the code, which is going to pass all this in here. And we're going to get rid of these. We're going to make them private because we don't care to pass on what's going to happen with these things. Well, there we go, and let's just reformat the code again. Format the code, so we have those things. But you know, these things are looking for this dot blanks and this dot whatever, right? So we're going to say this dot. Almost done, guys. So I'll make this one work for you. Give me a couple more minutes, and then I'll let you guys go and have a beautiful weekend and a fantastic day, holiday. That you guys are going to spend time off doing nothing and not studying, right? Some of you. Huh? Okay. And then I want to rename this thing. So I want to rename symbol. That's going to be called _grapes, and rename symbol. Just to kind of align with our conventions, right? So that way that will work. That whole thing will work, right? There really isn't a faster way to doing this, and I wish there was, but there isn't a mass way of adding one thing to everything. And renaming, I can do a change, but I can't rename all of them all at once, at least not that I know of. Although they have, a lot of our little IDEs have these little quick ways of renaming a bunch of stuff, right? To make our workflow a little nicer. Okay, cool, so I've got all that, and that means all these are renamed too, because they've been renamed, right? So now I've got my spin function, and what I want to do is it returns the bet line, right? So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to call the spin function when I click that spin button. And I'm not going to check to see if I have enough money yet or nothing. Spin those reels. I'm going to call the this._reels function. There it is. And that's going to return the value. That's what it's going to do. It's going to return a value. And because it's going to return a value, I can do a console.log, right, this._reels, which should return banana blank and blah, blah, and whatever, right? So let's spin that. Transpile everything, check it locally, right? So check it locally. So I'm going to go back to my, not there, that's my Azure. Go back to the other one. And here it is. Check it locally, so refresh, and then click start. And I'll watch down here if it works. Spin, banana, orange, grapes, right? Spin, cherry, blank, orange. So I'm almost there, right? Spin, blank, blank, grapes. I didn't win yet. and it keeps spinning, but I'm returning the array. I don't care to return the array. I care to return each of the values individually, but that's easy to be done because that's just an array that I can split off. Now that I have the array, I can check to see what I spun, and I'm going to show each of those positions, right, is going to be a reel. So reel 1, reel 2, reel 3, depending on which one it's going to be, it's going to put the images in those places because I know which reel I have based on my slot machine. You guys all see that, right? So I've got that image. I've got the images, and I've got part of my functionality working now. And now the next piece for you guys to do is calculate, did I make any money? Do I have the check? Because it's the other piece. The other piece that I have in here, and if I go back to the other one for a second, right? The other piece that I have in here that I didn't do yet is I didn't do calculate winnings. I did the reels. My next one would be to do this one, determine winnings. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to check to see how many blanks is equal to 0. And if I do, I can calculate my winnings. Here's my winnings, show a loss or a win. And depending on what I do, I've got some other functions in there, and I can tell you how much money I want. I'm almost there. Like within another hour or so, I can get all my functionality working to the console, right? And then after I got my stuff working to the console, the next play is going to be start showing my images and then updating my background. Questions around what I'm doing? I'm trying to help you guys build your slot machine. We're kind of halfway there, I'll tell you right now. We still got labels to put on the slot machine to show my credits. I haven't done that yet. I've got labels to show how many, what my bet is. I haven't done that yet. I don't have a power button. I don't have a reset button, right? And I don't have a jack button. I don't have all those things that I need to add in, right? And those things might be, some of those things are going to be part of my slot machine image, which I may have to update. I may have to modify my slot machine image to provide a space for my text to go in, right? And then measure my text object and try it out a couple times. That's it for me, guys. I want you guys to have a fantastic reading week. I'm sure some of you will work and have a great Valentine's Day on Sunday. And we'll see you back, not next week, but the week after. Okay, thanks.